6 months after their first encounter, Staff Sergeant Chen found himself assigned to the same forward operating base as Private First Class Martinez in eastern Afghanistan. The assignment was routine for Chen, his third deployment to the region. But learning that Martinez would be part of their operational unit created a mixture of anticipation and curiosity he had not expected. The base was situated in a valley surrounded by mountains that provided excellent observation positions for enemy forces. Taliban fighters had been using the elevated terrain to harass American patrols and supply convoys with increasing frequency. Intelligence reports suggested that enemy snipers were operating from ranges that made conventional response difficult. Chen's role involved maintaining weapons systems for the entire unit, ensuring that all equipment remained functional under harsh desert conditions. The work was demanding but familiar. Sand, heat, and constant use created maintenance challenges that required daily attention and considerable expertise to overcome. Martinez operated from a different section of the base, working with personnel whose assignments Chun was not cleared to know about. He occasionally saw her moving between buildings, always carrying equipment cases and maintaining the same quiet professionalism he remembered from their meeting at Fort Bragg. But their duties did not overlap, and meaningful conversation seemed unlikely. The situation changed during the third week of deployment. Enemy sniper fire had killed 2 American soldiers and wounded 4 others during routine patrol operations. The attacks came from positions so distant that return fire proved ineffective. Traditional counter-sniper tactics required air support that was not always available due to other operational priorities. Battalion Command decided that a more specialized response was necessary. Chen learned about the decision when he was ordered to prepare specific equipment for a mission he was not authorized to know details about. The request list included items that clearly indicated long-range precision shooting operations. 1 Barrett M82A1 rifle, with additional spare parts and specialized ammunition. Advanced optical equipment including laser rangefinders and ballistic computers. Camouflage materials suitable for rocky terrain. Communications equipment for extended independent operations. Supplies for a team that might remain in position for several days without resupply. Chen recognized the equipment profile immediately. Someone was planning a counter-sniper mission that would involve extended reconnaissance followed by precision engagement at extreme range. The type of operation that required skills possessed by very few military personnel. 2 days later, Chen watched Martinez and 3 other soldiers disappear into the mountains before dawn, carrying the equipment he had prepared. The team moved with efficiency that suggested extensive experience working together, despite the fact that Chun had never seen them interact before the mission briefing. Radio communications remained minimal for the next 72 hours. Chen knew the team was in position somewhere in the hostile terrain surrounding the valley, but their exact location was classified information he did not need to know. The silence created tension among personnel who understood that American lives depended on mission success. Enemy sniper attacks stopped completely during those 3 days. Patrols that had previously drawn fire from multiple positions encountered no resistance. Supply convoys moved without incident. The psychological effect was almost as significant as the tactical advantage. Knowledge that American counter-snipers were actively hunting seemed to make enemy fighters reluctant to expose themselves. The team returned on the 4th morning, appearing at the base perimeter as quietly as they had departed. Martinez looked exhausted but satisfied, carrying her rifle case and additional equipment that Chen did not recognize. The other team members separated immediately, heading to different sections of the base for debriefing sessions that would remain classified. Chen approached Martinez as she signed her weapon back into the armory. She moved slowly, obviously feeling the effects of 3 days in harsh terrain with minimal rest and constant alertness. But her equipment showed the same meticulous care he had observed before, properly cleaned and maintained despite field conditions. "How did it go?" Chen asked quietly. Martinez paused, considering how much she could say about operations that would remain classified for decades. "Mission accomplished," she said finally. Chen understood the limitation, but his curiosity pushed him to ask more specific questions. "Long shots. Longer than anything I had done before," Martinez admitted. 1,400 meters on the first target. 1,530 meters on the second. Chen felt his breath catch. Those distances approached the absolute limit of what the Barrett system could achieve under perfect conditions. In mountainous terrain, with wind and elevation changes, such shots required capabilities that bordered on supernatural. Both confirmed kills? He asked. Both confirmed. Plus intelligence gathering that should keep this area quiet for several months. Martinez's tone suggested that eliminating enemy snipers had been only one objective of the mission. The team had obviously collected information about enemy capabilities and intentions that would influence future operations. But those details would never be shared with personnel who did not have specific need to know. Chen helped Martinez inventory her equipment, checking each item against the list he had prepared 4 days earlier. Everything was present and accounted for, properly maintained despite extended field use. The attention to detail was remarkable considering the stress and fatigue she had obviously experienced. The 1,400-meter shot, Chen said carefully. What were the conditions? Martinez looked around to ensure their conversation remained private. 15-mile-per-hour crosswind, gusting to 20. Temperature differential of 40 degrees between firing position and target area. Uphill angle of approximately 12 degrees. Chen tried to imagine making such calculations under combat stress, with enemy forces potentially searching for his position. The mathematics alone would challenge most people under ideal conditions. Adding the pressure of life and death consequences made Martinez's achievement almost incomprehensible. How long did you observe the target before engaging? 18 hours. We identified the position on the first day, but needed to understand the routine before taking action. Pattern analysis, escape route planning, wind condition monitoring. The patience required for effective sniping was something Chen had read about but never experienced personally. Remaining motionless for 18 hours while maintaining constant alertness demanded physical and mental discipline that few people possessed. The ability to remain focused when the critical moment finally arrived required additional skills that could not be taught through conventional training. What did you learn? Chen asked. Martinez considered the question carefully. That distance changes everything. The calculations become more complex, environmental factors have greater impact, and target identification becomes much more difficult. But the principles remain the same. Patience, preparation, and precise execution. Chen nodded, though he suspected her understated description concealed challenges that would have defeated most marksmen. The casual way she discussed extreme long-range shooting suggested capabilities that placed her among the most elite performers in military history. Over the following weeks, Chen had opportunities to observe Martinez during routine base operations. She maintained the same quiet professionalism, never discussing her achievements or seeking recognition for mission success. Other personnel seemed to understand that she possessed unusual capabilities, but she discouraged attention and focused on preparation for future assignments. The Barrett M82A1 remained her constant companion. Chen washed her clean and maintained the weapon daily, checking every component with obsessive attention to detail. The routine suggested someone whose life depended on perfect equipment function, not someone going through required procedures. During their final week at the forward operating base, Chen approached Martinez with a personal question that had been troubling him since their first meeting at Fort Bragg. Do you ever have doubts? He asked. About what you do, I mean. Martinez paused her equipment maintenance and looked directly at him. Every day, she said quietly. But doubt is different from regret. I doubt whether I made the best possible decision, whether I could have done something differently, whether the intelligence was completely accurate. But I do not regret protecting American lives or accomplishing missions that needed to be done. Chen appreciated her honesty. The psychological burden of her responsibilities was something he had wondered about but never felt comfortable discussing. Martinez's ability to acknowledge uncertainty while maintaining confidence in her actions suggested remarkable mental strength. How do you handle the pressure? Training, Martinez replied immediately. Endless repetition of procedures until they become automatic. When everything else becomes uncertain, you rely on fundamentals that have been practiced so many times that thinking is not required. The answer made sense to Chen. Military training emphasized repetition precisely because combat conditions eliminated time for conscious decision-making. But Applying that principle to precision shooting at extreme ranges, with lives depending on single shots, required dedication that exceeded normal military standards. Their deployment ended 2 weeks later. Chen returned to Fort Bragg and resumed normal duties, maintaining weapons for personnel whose assignments rarely involved the challenges Martinez faced routinely. But his perspective on military service had changed permanently. He had witnessed capabilities that redefined his understanding of what individual soldiers could achieve. Martinez represented something beyond normal military excellence, a combination of natural ability and developed skill that created almost legendary performance. But she wore her achievements quietly, without the ego or arrogance that might be expected from someone with her record. 6 months later, Chun received orders for another deployment. Afghanistan again, different base, similar mission. As he prepared equipment lists for the upcoming assignment, he found himself hoping that Martinez might be assigned to the same operation. Not because he needed her protection, but because working alongside someone of her caliber elevated everyone's performance. The military occasionally produced individuals whose achievements redefined what seemed possible. Martinez was one of those people, but she carried her exceptional abilities with humility that made her even more impressive. Chen understood that he had been privileged to witness something extraordinary, a level of professional competence that few people would ever see. The Barrett M82A1 was a remarkable weapon system, engineered to provide capabilities that seemed almost magical. But, in the hands of someone like Private First Class Sarah Martinez, it became a tool that could change the outcome of entire military operations through the precise application of exceptional skill under impossible conditions. Chen never forgot the lessons he learned from watching her work. Excellence was not about seeking recognition or advancement. It was about developing capabilities that could serve purposes greater than personal ambition, then applying those capabilities with quiet professionalism when the mission required it. Private First Class Sarah Martinez walked toward the 1,000-meter range with her rifle case, aware that Staff Sergeant Chun was probably still processing their conversation. She was accustomed to the reaction. Most people made assumptions based on her appearance, then struggled to reconcile those assumptions with reality when they discovered her actual qualifications. The weight of the Barrett case felt comfortable in her grip. 50 pounds of precision-engineered equipment that had become as familiar as her own breathing. She had carried variations of this weapon system through mountains in Afghanistan, across desert terrain in Iraq, and through urban environments in Syria. Each mission had taught her something new about the capabilities and limitations of both the weapon and herself. Martinez had not chosen to become a sniper. The military had chosen her. During advanced individual training at Fort Leonard Wood, her instructors noticed something unusual about her performance on the rifle range. While other trainees struggled to achieve minimum qualifying scores, Martinez consistently shot expert-level groups that impressed even veteran drill sergeants. The discovery led to additional testing. Military occupational specialty counselors administered aptitude evaluations designed to identify candidates for specialized training programs. Martinez scored in the 99th percentile for spatial reasoning, mathematical computation under stress, and psychological stability. More importantly, she demonstrated the patience and attention to detail that effective snipers required. But aptitude testing was only the beginning. Special operations selection courses eliminated 90% of candidates through physical and mental challenges that pushed human capabilities to their limits. Martinez had survived training programs where grown men collapsed from exhaustion, quit from frustration, or simply decided the demands exceeded their willingness to continue. The Advanced Urban Sniper course at Fort Benning lasted 16 weeks. Students learned to engage targets at extreme ranges under adverse conditions while avoiding detection by enemy forces. They studied ballistics, meteorology, camouflage, reconnaissance, and tactical movement. But, most importantly, they learned to make life and death decisions under pressure that would break most people. Martinez had graduated second in her class of 12 students. The only graduate who outperformed her was a Marine gunnery sergeant with 8 years of previous combat experience. Her instructors noted that she possessed unusual natural ability combined with work ethic that bordered on obsessive. She practiced when others rested, studied when others relaxed, and constantly sought ways to improve her performance. Her first combat deployment came 6 months after graduation. Afghanistan, embedded with a special operations team conducting reconnaissance missions along the Pakistani border. The assignment was supposed to provide controlled exposure to combat conditions while she gained experience under the supervision of veteran operators. Reality proved more challenging than training had prepared her for. 3 weeks into the deployment, her team encountered a Taliban observation post that threatened an entire convoy of humanitarian supplies heading to isolated villages. The enemy position was situated on rocky terrain that made conventional assault extremely difficult and costly. Martinez found herself in a hide position 800 meters from the enemy fighters, armed with her Barrett M82A1 and facing her first real-world engagement. No training exercise had fully prepared her for the psychological pressure of taking human life. The scope revealed individual faces, personal details that made the enemy seem human rather than abstract. But the convoy contained medical supplies desperately needed by villagers, including children. Martinez understood that her actions would directly impact innocent lives. She made her decision based on mission requirements rather than personal feelings. The first shot eliminated the enemy spotter at 847 meters. Clean hit center mass, instant incapacitation. The second shot took out the machine gunner before he could traverse his weapon toward the convoy route. The third shot neutralized the radio operator before he could call for reinforcements. 3 shots, 3 confirmed kills, mission accomplished. The convoy proceeded safely to its destination, delivering supplies that probably saved dozens of lives. Martinez felt no satisfaction from the kills themselves, but took pride in mission success and protection of innocent civilians. Word of her performance reached higher command levels faster than she expected. Special operations units operated in small communities where exceptional performance was quickly recognized and remembered. Martinez found herself requested by name for increasingly challenging assignments. Her second deployment involved urban operations in Iraq. Enemy snipers had been targeting American patrols from concealed positions within populated areas. Traditional counter-sniper tactics proved ineffective because the enemy fighters blended easily with civilian populations and operated from buildings that could not be destroyed without causing innocent casualties. Martinez spent 3 months playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek through the streets of Ramadi. She learned to think like her opponents, anticipating their movements, and positioning herself to neutralize threats before they could engage American forces. The work required patience that measured in hours rather than minutes, combined with split-second decision-making when targets finally presented themselves. During that deployment, she eliminated 7 enemy snipers and disrupted multiple planned attacks on American personnel. Her actions directly saved the lives of soldiers who never knew they had been targeted. The psychological impact on enemy forces was equally significant. Knowing that an American sniper was actively hunting them made enemy fighters hesitant to operate in areas where Martinez might be positioned. Her third deployment brought her to Syria, working alongside CIA personnel conducting operations against high-value targets. The missions required skills that went far beyond marksmanship. Martinez learned advanced reconnaissance techniques, electronic surveillance, and intelligence-gathering methods. She discovered that effective snipers were often more valuable for the information they collected than for the shots they fired. But when shooting was necessary, the stakes were higher than anything she had previously experienced. Targets included terrorist commanders whose deaths could disrupt entire networks, bomb makers whose elimination could prevent attacks on civilian populations, and financiers whose removal could cripple enemy operations. Martinez adapted to the increased pressure by developing almost obsessive attention to detail. She studied target patterns for weeks before engaging, learning daily routines, identifying vulnerabilities, and planning contingencies for every possible scenario. Her preparation was so thorough that successful shots became almost inevitable rather than challenging. Now, walking toward the range at Fort Bragg, Martinez carried the psychological weight of 4 deployments and achievements that most soldiers could never imagine. The training session ahead was routine maintenance of skills that had been proven under the worst possible conditions. But she approached practice with the same dedication she had brought to combat operations. The 1,000-meter range was empty when she arrived. Martinez preferred practicing alone, without the distraction of other shooters or the pressure of being observed. She set up her equipment with practiced efficiency, assembling shooting supports, arranging ammunition, and calibrating her scope for current environmental conditions. The Barrett M82A1 felt natural in her hands as she settled into a prone shooting position. Muscle memory guided her through procedures that had been repeated thousands of times. Breathing control, sight alignment, trigger manipulation, follow-through. The fundamentals of marksmanship that separated professional shooters from weekend enthusiasts. Her first shot at 1,000 meters hit dead center of the target. The second shot landed less than half an inch away. By the 10th shot, Martinez had created a group that could be covered by a silver dollar. Performance that would impress Olympic-level competitors, achieved with equipment designed for battlefield use rather than precision competition. But Martinez was not shooting for accuracy alone. Each shot was practice for decisions that might save American lives or accomplish mission objectives under combat conditions. The targets were not just pieces of paper marked with scoring rings. They represented enemy threats that needed to be eliminated quickly and quietly. She fired 50 rounds during the 2-hour session, maintaining consistent accuracy despite the punishing recoil of the 50 caliber ammunition. Her shoulder would be bruised for days, but the discomfort was irrelevant compared to maintaining proficiency with her primary weapon system. As Martinez packed her equipment, she reflected on the conversation with Staff Sergeant Chen. She understood his surprise and respected his curiosity, but discussing her experiences with personnel who had not shared similar responsibilities was always difficult. How could she explain missions that remained classified? How could she describe the psychological impact of decisions that most people would never face? The Special Operations Sniper badge on her uniform represented capabilities that few people possessed, and even fewer understood. But, for Martinez, the badge was simply recognition of skills she had developed to serve her country and protect fellow service members. The recognition mattered less than the responsibility. She signed her weapon back into the armory, completing the paperwork with the same attention to detail she brought to everything else. Staff Sergeant Chen was not present, probably completing other duties around the base. Martinez was somewhat relieved to avoid another awkward conversation about her background. Walking back to her barracks, Martinez thought about her next deployment, scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. Another challenging assignment in a dangerous location, working with personnel she had never met before. She would once again face the process of proving her capabilities to people who made assumptions based on her appearance. But that was part of the job. Martinez had accepted long ago that her effectiveness depended partly on being underestimated. Enemy forces that dismissed her as a threat often made mistakes that provided tactical advantages. Fellow American personnel who doubted her abilities usually learned quickly to trust her judgment. The Barrett M82A1 had been her constant companion through 4 combat deployments. Tomorrow she would clean and maintain the weapon again, preparing for training that would keep her skills sharp. The routine never ended, but Martinez found comfort in the predictability of preparation. Some soldiers dreamed of leaving military service and returning to civilian life. Martinez could not imagine any other career that would provide the same sense of purpose and challenge. The responsibility was enormous, but she had proven capable of meeting it. Staff Sergeant Mike Chun had seen every type of weapon the military owned during his 15 years of service. From standard-issue M4 carbines to heavy machine guns, he could strip and reassemble most firearms blindfolded. Walking through the armory at Fort Bragg that Tuesday morning, nothing should have surprised him. But something did. The Barrett M82A1 sat on the cleaning station like a sleeping giant. 50 caliber, semi-automatic, capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding a mile. Chun had qualified expert on the weapon system twice, earning his own long-range precision shooting badges through grueling training courses that separated the dedicated from the merely interested. The rifle represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship technology. What made him pause was not the weapon itself, but the care with which it had been maintained. Every surface gleamed with proper oil application. The scope mounts showed no scratches or wear marks that would indicate careless handling. The bipod legs were perfectly aligned. Someone had spent considerable time ensuring this particular Barrett was in absolute perfect condition. Chen picked up the maintenance log attached to the rifle case. Standard procedure required detailed records of every cleaning, every round fired, every adjustment made to the weapon system. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical in its accuracy. Range sessions were documented with exact round counts, weather conditions, and performance notes. Whoever owned this rifle took their craft seriously. The door to the armory opened behind him. Chen looked over his shoulder to see a young woman in Army combat uniform approaching. She moved with the quiet confidence that experienced soldiers developed, but her appearance suggested she was barely old enough to have completed basic training. Short brown hair tucked neatly under her patrol cap, average height, unremarkable build. She looked like thousands of other junior enlisted personnel on the base. "Excuse me, Sergeant," she said politely. "I need to sign out my rifle for range practice." Chen glanced at the clipboard in her hands, then back at the Barrett. "This your weapon?" "Yes, Sergeant." He studied her more carefully. The Barrett M82A1 was not a weapon system assigned to junior personnel. The training requirements alone eliminated most soldiers from consideration. Beyond the technical complexity, the physical demands of accurately firing a .50 caliber rifle required exceptional strength and conditioning. The recoil could injure inexperienced shooters. "You qualified on this system?" Chen asked. "Yes, Sergeant." Her answers were respectful, but brief. Chen appreciated soldiers who did not waste time with unnecessary conversation. But something about this situation felt unusual. The woman appeared to be a private first class based on her visible rank insignia. PFCs typically handle basic infantry weapons, not specialized precision shooting systems worth more than most people's cars. Chen decided to test her knowledge. "What's the effective range on this weapon?" "Maximum effective range is 1,800 meters against personnel targets, Sergeant. Maximum range is approximately 6,800 meters under optimal conditions." The answer came without hesitation. Chen nodded slowly. Correct information, but many soldiers could memorize specifications from technical manuals. Real expertise came from practical experience. Ballistic coefficient of the standard .50 BMG round. 0.67 for the standard ball round, Sergeant. Match-grade ammunition runs higher depending on the specific load. Chen felt his eyebrows raise slightly. That information was not found in basic manuals. She was either genuinely knowledgeable or had done extensive additional study. He decided to push further. Wind holds at 800 meters in a 15-mile-per-hour crosswind. The question required mathematical calculations that most soldiers would need time to work through. Effective long-range shooting demanded instant compensation for environmental factors. Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure all affected bullet trajectory. Computing corrections quickly separated competent marksmen from exceptional ones. Approximately 4.2 mils left hold, Sergeant. Assuming standard atmospheric conditions and no significant elevation change. Chen stared at her. The answer was not only correct, but delivered with the casual confidence of someone who had performed the calculation hundreds of times. He began to suspect this was not a typical junior enlisted soldier. "How many confirmed kills do you have?" he asked quietly. The question was personal, potentially sensitive. Combat veterans understood that discussing such matters required discretion. Kill counts were not bragging rights among professional soldiers. They represented serious responsibilities, life and death decisions made under extreme pressure. "I prefer not to discuss that, Sergeant." Her response was appropriate. Professional snipers rarely shared specific numbers, especially with personnel they did not know well. Chen respected the boundaries she had established, but his curiosity was fully engaged now. He looked more carefully at her uniform. Standard Army combat uniform, properly maintained, regulation appearance. But, as his eyes moved across her chest, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Above her left breast pocket, barely visible beneath the fabric, was the outline of a skill badge he had only seen worn by a handful of people in his entire military career. The Special Operations Sniper Badge was not a qualification any soldier could simply earn through standard training courses. It required graduation from the most demanding marksmanship program the military offered, successful completion of advanced reconnaissance training, and demonstrated performance in actual combat operations. The badge represented skills that took years to develop and courage that few possessed. Chin's hands began to shake slightly as the implications hit him. This young woman, who appeared barely out of her teens, was one of the most lethal long-range shooters in the entire United States military. The casual way she had answered his technical questions suddenly made perfect sense. She was not showing off knowledge from textbooks. She was sharing expertise earned through real-world application under the worst possible conditions. "Jesus," he whispered under his breath. The woman noticed his reaction, but said nothing. She simply waited patiently for him to complete whatever process was necessary to sign out her weapon. Her calm demeanor suggested she was accustomed to surprising people with her qualifications. Chin realized he had been testing someone whose skills far exceeded his own. The Barrett M82A1 was not an unusual weapon for her to carry. It was probably as familiar as his own sidearm. The meticulous maintenance he had observed was the work of someone whose life depended on perfect equipment function. He looked at her face again, trying to reconcile her appearance with her demonstrated expertise. She seemed impossibly young to have accumulated the experience her badge represented. Special operations training typically required several years of military service before candidates were even considered. Advanced sniper training added additional time. Combat deployments where such skills would be tested and proven demanded even more experience. "How long have you been in?" Chin asked. 6 years, Sergeant." 6 years. She would have enlisted straight out of high school, completed basic training and advanced individual training, then somehow earned acceptance into special operations programs typically reserved for much more senior personnel. The timeline suggested exceptional performance from the beginning of her military career. Chin began to understand that he was looking at someone truly unusual. The military occasionally produced individuals whose natural abilities combined with relentless dedication to create capabilities that defied normal expectations. Such people were rare, valuable, and often underestimated by those who judged based on appearance rather than performance. He signed the paperwork to release her weapon, but his hands were still trembling slightly. In 15 years of military service, he had never encountered anyone quite like this young woman. The casual competence she displayed was both impressive and slightly intimidating. "Good luck at the range," Chin managed to say. "Thank you, Sergeant." She signed the appropriate forms, secured her rifle case, and headed toward the door. Chin watched her go, still trying to process what had just happened. From the outside, she looked like any other junior soldier heading to routine training. But he now knew better. The door closed behind her, leaving Chin alone with his thoughts. He had just met someone whose skills were probably discussed in classified briefings at the highest levels of military command. Someone whose achievements were likely known by special operations commanders across multiple services. Someone whose very existence was probably considered a strategic asset by military planners. And he had almost treated her like a typical private first class who might need instruction on basic weapon safety. Chin shook his head and returned to his normal duties, but the encounter stayed with him. He found himself wondering about the missions she had completed, the challenges she had faced, the responsibilities she carried. The brief conversation had given him a glimpse into a level of military capability he had never fully understood before. The Barrett M82A1 was an impressive weapon system, but in the hands of someone like her, it became something approaching legendary.